So I just got done listening to Lords of the Lance audiobook and sifting through all the reviews and community discussions online to be able to give a comprehensive breakdown and discussion here about the book. I'll start this video off with a spoiler-free section and discussion and then move into spoiler sections from there. I'm putting up a full contents page and agenda for you so you can skip to the parts you like. So I'll start with my spoiler-free review and just the core discussions in general about the book, which will apply to anyone whether you've read it or not. We'll then look to, we'll move into the spoiler discussions. We'll be plotting the journey they actually take in the book using the interactive map that we've been given. I'll then move on to the topics of the law-breaking content in this book, which has the community in a bit of an uproar. I'll talk about the good parts, the things that I liked. I'll focus on the battles that I felt were a little bit silly. I'll go into some additional gripes I had with the book, and then we'll conclude and wrap up. What I do want to do is try and offer alternatives and solutions if I give criticisms, because I'm not a fan of complaining without trying to back that up. So with this spoiler-free starting section, I will try and answer your likely three main questions. What is this book roughly about? Why does the community generally not like it? And what are the good things I can expect to get out of it? Now, when this book was initially announced, I began to get very hyped for the story to come out. After reading the blurb and the Warhammer community post, and that post also referenced a great fantasy book called The Guardians of the Forest by the same author, which is a book I really enjoyed back in the day. So here I am expecting more in that vein. Now we have our very first book to reignite the relaunch of fantasy, delve into factions not covered in so long. I'm here ready for The Mummy Returns meets the Crusades to happen in this book. And I was very close to ordering the limited edition, book edition, but I never did. And I thought, here we are, we're at the start of something big. How often are you going to get this chance to be at the start of something? But luckily something held me back, because I think I would have been very disappointed if I did spend that much. So the only logical end to such overhyping can be disappointment, and holding anything in such high regard and expectation only makes it harder to enjoy what you eventually get, because it's all that much harder to live up to those expectations. So take that knowledge in. If you're not so overhyped, you may certainly enjoy this book a lot more than the diehards of us out there. So why didn't this book live up to the expectations, and why is the community generally giving it a low rating? Primarily one of my issues are around the portrayal of the Tomb Kings, which is not something that I've seen too spoken about from other people. When we have a launch book, in my opinion, we've got a launch faction here such as the Tomb Kings, I'm really expecting some depth, insight, story to be given to that faction as a focus, to promote them into the new game, get people interested in collecting and playing them. But really what we get is just brain-dead skeletons, evil masters who have no ambitions, motives. We don't learn about their society, how they plan for their battles, or anything other than just seeing them from the point of view of the Bretonnians. And I believe that's a big mistake, because no one walks away from this inspired about Tomb Kings. And let me tell you, the Tomb Kings are quite capable of having great depth, free thinking, their own agendas, and are far from being this straight evil depiction that this book and seemingly Games Workshop wants to bucket all the factions into this good and evil section now for some reason. Regarding Bretonnia, they have changed the typical lore here, and it's going to be a case of, if you're coming into the hobby new, you won't really know or care. But if you're in the know, you're going to be a bit disappointed by the changes and the portrayals, which I'll dive into post this spoiler-free discussion. So much so that it could stop you enjoying the book entirely. And that's because they've taken a large gamble here in making this initial book a controversial one, trying to push new themes into a community that is expecting the return of what they loved before. Mostly this game and its lore should be right where we left it, more of the same, not trying to reinvent things. Certainly at this stage, we should be getting a thank you to the old community and a return of a classic. Here's what you've been asking for, not a reinvented adaptation. We want WoW Classic, no changes style, RuneScape old school style. Now I also found a lot of situations in this book where I'm asking myself, how did you survive that? Why did you even do that thing? And there are a lot of incompetence in battle decision making in this book, which is frustrating. A lot of here's some impossible solution right in the nick of time every time to solve this scenario for you. A lot of comparisons rightly being made to typical Marvel and action films that don't care for realistic outcomes. And where this leads you mostly is down a path of no one's ever really in danger. We just rightly predict that it'll get figured out, so you don't have to get as invested. You're never shocked by the results of any battles. The story itself is slow-paced for a good 2/3 of it overall. It's not an action-packed story throughout, so be prepared for that. There's also a lot of filler sections and storylines that develop but don't really conclude meaningfully. The characters are not ones on either side you're going to be eagerly trying to recapture playing on the tabletop, inspired by their actions and personalities. And that's a shame, because what you want is for people going out, painting banners and colours in line with the cool army and characters that they just read about, that are in the lore, especially with Bretonnia, where it's all about these individual heroes. If you go look at the Arcane Journal lore, which occurs post the events of this book, I actually wonder if that would have made for a better story than this one. You can go read into that and decide for yourself, but there we get these big battles with orcs, we get high elf battles, and then it comes into Bretonnia proper, and I feel more like that would be a great launch into the old world. More armies, more things going on, give me Cetra himself, and so forth. Now, the story does have its moments. If you're frothing at the mouth for old world content like I was, you're going to get enjoyment out of this. Generally, I'm happy for any old world books and hobby, regardless of it being of average quality, because I'm still in this mass consume stage. But if you're not, this is likely one to avoid. There is one more faction outside of the Tomb Kings and Bretonnia that gets some attention in this book. I won't spoil who it is, but if you're interested in others, then you may want to look into that. If you were avoiding the book just because it's focused solely around those two factions, have a bit of an extra look. There are in this book some fun side battles that feel a bit like the warg attack scene in Lord of the Rings Two Towers. These aren't the main battles, but these side troubles along the way, that they have more flavour to them. They're quite good, unique and enjoyable. We delve into more of the possibilities and danger of the world, and I like that. It's always nice to see and hear about certain miniatures that you own or like. For example, we get some cool depictions of Grail pilgrims, a lot of detail about Pegasus fighting, and things like sepulchral stalkers and tomb scorpions featured in these battles. There's a decent amount of tension in this book where it's like, okay, danger is around every corner. When is it coming? A lot of that sort of build up. It kind of keeps you on edge and invested. We do learn a lot about the Lady of the Lake and how she works with the handmaidens also. There's a decent amount of effort made to tie this in and explain it. I think that's quite unique. We don't necessarily get a lot of that in the past, so it's nice to explore this link between Bretonnia and Wood Elves, especially as two of the core factions that we're featuring. Now, interestingly, this book was pulled from Audible at the time of this recording, which is never a good sign. I'm not sure if they were trying to reset review bombing or something like that. It's interesting. We don't have a reason for that, but I think it's strange. It's a bit of a red flag. Reviews are low for this book across all platforms. Listening also to the audiobook, the narrator is a very love-hate style one. I feel that too, and that's been the general consensus. It places on a bit of an accent due to it, I guess, being for Bretonnia, it has a bit of a lisp, and people may find that a bit grating, so make sure to sample it before you go ahead on that path. And so really, I think that's where I'll leave my discussion for the spoiler-free review. Hopefully that's been enough guidance to help you make a bit more of an informed decision. Moving into spoiler review and discussion, I thought it would be fun to plot the journey through the book on the interactive map that we've been given. I'm annotating the path more or less that we travel through the book, starting here in Aquilena and travelling down by boat towards the port of Zandri. Now, a big part of the criticism from many people is its slow pace, and it's many chapters in at this point and fairly uneventful travel that we're basically experiencing. So had I seek to inject anything myself, I feel an altercation here with the orc pirates on the way down to Xandri would have been nice, allowing us to build some specific character around a specific orc. The pirate theme is a fun one because it's really where people can get excited and go nuts kit bashing orcs that way, but we need a fun narrative to inspire that. This would then allow us more to tie in later when we eventually get that cameo from the orcs, where the orcs can get another foray in towards the end of the book, and it would all just feel a bit more related. We're in the Badlands here, so give us more orc action. Everyone's gonna die anyway, so it doesn't really matter if we have this battle here where we're going to lose some of the Bretonnians. But following along ahead, we head further down and across. Eventually we get this battle outside of Khemri. We then, after that battle, head into Khemri proper. This is where everyone dies. After that, they flee north. They head into the marshes. They find the castle and have their battle with the Flesh Eater courts. They move out into the giant stomping grounds, and a few of them do get stumped by a giant, and then we head up towards the mountains before this final standoff, and the orcs come to essentially save them. Rapidly they steal their boats, and we finish up in southern Tilia. So at this point I expect to get some small story about, going back and taking up lord positions they wanted, or some confirmation of the romances that have been forming, but I find it unusual we don't get any of that. Overall, we've been shipped a story that involves half the book of traveling to a location to die without much of a fight back, like 90% of them just all getting killed at that destination. Then half of the book is us trying to flee back as a small group of survivors. And did anyone expect or picture this coming in? Onto the topics of law-breaking content and how the community has rated and reacted to this content. I think the community are right to be upset about things like the bow wielding that we see from these Pegasus Knights. Games Workshop have then been extra unnecessarily controversial by, completing this law-breaking change by making them all female. Just to add some extra spice to that situation. But mostly for me it was lazily done, in that there was no real attempt at all to justify or introduce this change. I can get behind a situation or circumstance that has allowed this to occur. It's a big world, a lot of different armies and factions, within a faction. I'm not against female presence in the army or archers, but let's talk about it at least. Don't just try and be like, yeah, it's always been that way, everyone's cool with it. We don't know if this is just an isolated situation. Is it widespread amongst Bretonnia now? Is this the accepted law and understanding? Are you actually going to try and sell us ranged knight miniatures in the future, or are we really just messing around here for no reason? That's, I think, one of the big issues that everybody has. And what's hilarious to me is the author was asked in that Warhammer community post, did the book present any challenges? And he's openly responded, the lands are in various new states of war, kings and queens are not the same, what people know of the old world is different. And then he proceeds to actually get the name wrong of, the King of Bretonnia, described the heraldry wrong. We have this confusing situation of the Amaranthine Queen in the book that's not really mentioned that way in the Arcane Journal, and suddenly the Lich Priest, Sepektu, I can't remember his name, is now the Amaranthine, and it's all misaligned. It's just a bit confusing. And look, we really could go on and on about the unusual portrayal of female characters, the presence of this disability of characters in the book, and many people have done large takes on that, so I won't continue to beat that dead Bretonnian horse on that one. Something I'm personally unsure about in the law regard is, and no one said anything, so I assume I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that Tomb Kings could only resurrect Nehikarans, and that they can't just go around resurrecting any old person from any of the other factions. Yet we see that in this book. So if anyone knows, comment and let me know where the law sits on their capability there, please. So that's a lot of negativity. Let's expand upon the good parts of the book. I did enjoy the battle with the flesh eaters for the most part. It felt very chaotic. I could imagine the location quite well. It had escalating threat, and the ending of this battle with the handmaiden essentially using herself as bait. It was some level of creativity rather than just I'm casting a spell to kill you all like we see in the last battle. So this is quite a nice touch. I like that threats are pretty much everywhere from various different locations, factions in the journey. It makes the world feel like it is dangerous. It's that fantasy dangerous setting of Warhammer. I enjoyed the concept of these giants who had carried these shipwrecks up to the hills and made their own little dens. And the fight that we have with the giant again was just a bit more creative, unique and fun. And these are the kind of scenarios that we want to uncover more, that make it feel more like Warhammer. I know there were times where I enjoyed some of the character building and exchanges, but it's nothing major to recall or write home about, unfortunately. I did get value out of this book. Right, it gave me various hours of engagement back into the old world. And while it wasn't everything I hoped for, it was something in my favorite space to be right now. So I'm happy for that and happy for the discussions that we have around this book, good or bad. To talk about sort of the biggest letdown for me is around some of the battles that we get. And when I look at what I love about the Middle-earth strategy battle game is that we can recreate these great fights from the films and the books, and that's the complete tie-in that I would expect from all of the Warhammer books, to have these battles that will perfectly tie in to scenarios we can recreate on the tabletop. But to do that, we can't have these Deus Ex outcomes every time that we can't essentially create on the table due to the imbalance and nonsense. So, regarding the battles that we see in the book, this final fight that we get between the last remnants of the Bretonnian host and the seemingly full might of Khemri still at this point has to be the most ridiculous thing I've ever read. The levels of impossible nonsense here, it is not even funny. So we have about 100 Bretonnians left, about 50-50 split of peasants and knights. They're all essentially on their last legs, definitely at this point. Then we have this full battle host of Khemri turn up and essentially corner them. We don't know their number, but given the past descriptions, they would be thousands strong. And at any rate, regardless of the numbers, the Lich Priest has a conversation with the Queen that goes something like this. Hey, where should we stand? Probably somewhere towards the front so that we can see what's going on. But won't the entire army crumble if you die? Shouldn't we just stand more towards the back? No, in fact, I think we can probably just shoot them with archers and kill them all before they even touch us. No. In fact, tell all the archers to go back to Khemri and the constructs. We don't need any of them. Just the regular chaff will do here fine. And we'll stand right towards the front. So we somehow get the most ridiculous cavalry charge ever that pumps through rank upon rank to actually get into melee range of this Lich Priest and the Queen, at which point, instead of just killing them all with their overwhelming might, the Tomb Kings killing them all with their overwhelming might and numbers, they decide they will engage in these single combats, these exchanges, while apparently the rest of the army just watches. Then, oh boy, we get, when things are not going well, the handmaiden pulls off the most overpowered, miraculous magic to date, just fully paralyzing the entire Tomb King force, turning the necromancy that they have upon itself, allowing the undead Grail Knight to turn on the Lich King and kill him. Is she like a demigod at this point? Do we realize how powerful in magic this High Lich Priest is supposed to be as well? So after that total situation, a half-disabled rider somehow rides through an entire orc camp to bait them out into the battle, at which point the orcs engage in no fighting with the Bretonnians and don't attempt to give chase to the Bretonnians as they go and steal all of their boats, which have also been completely left unguarded. So an entire camp of pirates who value their boats, I'm sure, empty to chase one rider, That's amazing storytelling right there. It's really hard to believe. Yeah, that battle made me the most mad. It's just you get to a point where it's like, how stupid do you believe your reader is to try and pull off this kind of nonsense? But that wasn't the only sort of pants on head stupid battle we got. We find ourselves in the heart of enemy territory. We're in Kemri, the city itself. We've just had a huge battle with them on the way to get here. We've lost an army before, which is who we've come to avenge. So we know this is an area of massive threat. And the conversation goes something like, so where are they all hiding? Well, all the undead live in tombs, don't they? So that's where they must be, and that's where your son must be. Right, got it. Well, let's send in both generals, all our best men, just a few of them, while we leave the whole army outside. We'll go in, kill all of them, bring out my son, just as easy as that. Well, we all know how that ended, of course. Just absolutely moronic decision making. Like, come on, like let's send out some scouts. Do we try and bait the Tomb Kings out? Do we try, let's look for clues in this mysterious Egyptian world, which is what this should all be about. Don't just all walk in there and allow yourselves to get ambushed. It's silly. And some of the other issues I have around the handmaidens are just sort of too strong. They're too overused. They keep saying on one hand how their power is diminished due to the distance from the forests and the source of their power, but they continue to just pull things out the bag whenever needed. They're just constantly sort of this pocket healer for hey, look, this person should have died. Never mind, just send them back to the handmaiden. They'll get sorted out. It's close to being the adventures of fantasy Florence Nightingale, this book. And regarding the other main characters, everyone's just a whinger. They're whinging about something, whinging about being the Knight of Quills, whinging about being deaf and looked down upon, whinging about being a woman, whinging about being from the Border Princes, whinging about other people they don't like. And we just never see a sort of a happy ending to all of their core issues. The book just kind of ends, right? We don't get a nice sort of happy ending for any of that, certainly. So we've just listened to a lot of whinging throughout the book, I feel. Let's take a second to talk about how they fall for the Lich Priest Deception Act twice, or is it 3 times at this point, where he returns depicted as her brother, no less, after they have fled the battle. Like, come on, let's at least turn up as some random knight who's escaped the battle, not like her brother, who's obviously they've just realized is definitely dead. How did the Lich Priest even find them anyway? Like, if he knew where they were this whole time, why is he not harassing them with carrion and stuff that could actually give chase? Then, of course, this super overpowered handmaiden situation again. She deals with him. I actually listened to this and was like, when I was done, I was like, I'm just going to pretend this part didn't happen. It's easier, and it had no bearing on the story anyway. Overall, the story's just weak, isn't it? The battles are what you hope for to be good, but there's not enough of those good ones and meaningful ones to carry it through. There's so much filler of just talking about where do we go next and how we're going to get there in really boring environments, like out at sea and going through the desert where there's nothing around to write about or care about. I feel like en route to Kemri, they should have found a tomb with some riches in or of some interest. They're going and taking some loot. Maybe some of the knights errant have gone a bit rogue because, they're out here on this mission. They don't really care about the main mission. They're out here looking for some glory and treasure. And that would tie into the arcane journal about Cetra seeming to be so angry about this apparent gold-stealing Bretonnians, when the reality is he basically killed them all. Let's give some world building to, hey, out there in the Tomb King lands, there's a lot of riches to be had for those bold enough to go searching. But it's just an empty desert in this book. There's nothing going on. Where are people getting cursed or booby-trapped in the process of all of this? The Mummy movie style. There's a lot of, I feel, option there that we've just kind of been void of. So rounding out my ramble, evidently I didn't enjoy the book too much, it's safe to say. Usually with these launch books, they have characters that will continue on in future books. So it'll be interesting to see if they do that here, and maybe like if we get something about wood elves in the future, will they try and bring one of these characters in? I would love a book all about Tomb Kings, so hopefully we can, maybe get some justice there. And who knows? I feel the only way is up from here in storytelling, so I'm cautiously optimistic for the future. Well, I thank you all for listening, and I hope you got some enjoyment at least out of the discussions. If not, hopefully you did like the voice. But what's that faint voice I can hear on the winds? Henry Cavill, save us.